This is a short version of a presentation that I gave at the Pearls of Wisdom conference in April 2019. It was the 30th anniversary conference of the British Association for Psychological Type. My presentation was entitled Pearls of Wisdom in Metaphor, and was designed to explore how metaphors, represented by images and underpinned with coaching techniques, enable people to describe their experience in their own way, leading to pearls of wisdom. My name's Robin Hills. I'm an emotional intelligence coach, trainer and facilitator. I'm very fortunate in having two concrete nouns for a name, which lend themselves to a logo. Here we have a robin, which is the little bird with a red breast that can be found in the gardens of Europe. Represented in the background are two hills. So together they combine to give a very distinctive logo. Robin Hills, my name. It's interesting that I've been called Peter, Stephen, Simon, been called Mr. Hill, Mr. Mills, Mr. Halls, and various other names that I can repeat since I've had my logo. So it's interesting how people take in information. It's interesting how people process information. A picture paints 1,000 words, and often we can see things in pictures that other people just can't see. Here we have 144 coloured dots. What is it that you're seeing? Many people will look at these coloured dots and will actually see a representation of the Mona Lisa. Does this help? If not, does this help? A metaphor is a figure of speech that describes a subject by comparing it to and describing it in forms of another, otherwise unrelated topic. Metaphors can represent experience more fully than abstract concepts, and so enable more effective communication. Metaphors condense information, making things more tangible and easier to work with. The metaphor for an experience has a similar structure to the experience that it represents. An interesting idea is that resilience is a metaphor in the context of human psychology and behaviour, and it works for all of the reasons that I've mentioned. The idea of resilience originates from material science. Resilience is described as the ability of material to absorb energy when it's deformed elastically and release that energy upon unloading. You probably remember working out Young's modulus when you were in your teens in your science classes, putting forces, weights on the end of springs and bits of elastic. Resilience can be measured by looking at the way in which the spring or the piece of elastic stretches with the applied force. Up to a certain point. Beyond a certain point, you get strain hardening and necking, and the material won't return to its original form. The metaphor of resilience, as applied to human behaviour, has serious limitations. What about learning, growing and developing through stress? What about adapting to situations and environments? In these instances, the metaphor doesn't work quite so well. What about too little resilience? Let me introduce you to the Squonk. The Squonk is a mythological creature that lives in the hemlock forests of southern Pennsylvania. It's a mythological creature because when it gets stressed, it cries itself into a pool of bubbles and tears. Not a very good survival strategy, hence it's a mythological creature. What about too much resilience? In these cases, people show a lack of empathy. They work through change, they cope exceedingly well, yet show little empathy and understanding for people who are struggling to adapt to situations. Note the colour of the hairstyle. Is that a measure of resilience? It may as well be when we compare it with other metaphors. The word metaphor comes from amphora, which is the Greek word for an urn, used to transport oil from one point to another. So, in effect, the word metaphor is a metaphor. Metaphors can be very powerful. They allow for difficult or sensitive subjects to be approached. They provide a way for reluctant individuals to open up and share their concerns. A metaphor allows people to discuss an emotional state without fear of conflict. A metaphor allows for cathartic conversations. A metaphor can be accessible to all levels within an organisation. A metaphor has a similar structure to the experience that it represents. It can represent an experience more fully than abstract concepts. A metaphor condenses information, making things more tangible and easier to work with. And a metaphor provides an important route into the deeper, more profound levels of a person's thinking. When people experience change, both the metaphor and the real-life experience generally change in tandem. When we look at Myers-Briggs Types, various people have given each of the types a particular label. These are metaphors. Here we see the metaphors associated with psychological type as given by Kiersey. Here we see the metaphors given to each psychological type given by personalitypage.com. Interestingly, Kiersey labels ISFJ as the protector, whilst personalitypage.com labels the INFJ as the protector. Here we see a different set of metaphors associated with each of the psychological types given by 16personalitytypes.com. Personalitypage.com labels the ENTJ as the executive, while 16personalitytypes.com labels the ESTJ as the executive. You will have your own meaning around the words, and sometimes these metaphors will work for you and sometimes they won't. It's really just a case of whether the metaphor works for you with your particular type. Images of Resilience is a collection of engaging metaphor cards representing a range of experiences and emotions linked to the theme of resilience. They explore different facets and connections with stress, change, challenge and learning. They facilitate the development of coaching conversations about experience of resilience. Each image has a range of suggested coaching questions to help explore what situations resilience may be needed in, what qualities or skills can be developed to strengthen resilience. During the workshop, delegates were given the opportunity to work with the 18 images, to experience the toolbox and to share their understanding of resilience and how it relates to the images. The instructions that were given were: what details does this picture show? What experience does it remind you of? What can you do with it? What is not apparent in the picture? What ideas does it spark to consider for the future? What does the image symbolize? What principles are at work in this picture? How can you define or measure what is shown here? Is the image accurate and efficient? How does this image speak to you personally? What's of value here? Who would like this image and how can we use it to help people? Broadly speaking, each particular mental function, the way in which people take in information and then process it, allows for a different way of interpreting each of the images. It's interesting to note that the first group of questions will apply more specifically to people with a sensing preference. The second group applies to people with an intuitive preference. The third group applies more to people who have a thinking preference. And the final set applies more to people with a feeling preference. Here are each of the psychological types with the dominant function and the auxiliary function. Combined together, they give a different way in which people will look at the world, take in information, and process information. In conclusion, extroverted intuition speaks in analogies. Introverted intuition speaks in metaphor. Extroverted sensing speaks from experience. Introverted sensing speaks from memory. Extroverted thinking speaks in practice. Introverted thinking speaks in theory. Extroverted feeling speaks with diplomacy. Introverted feeling speaks from the heart. I am the author of The Authority Guide to Emotional Resilience in Business, Strategies to Manage Stress and Weather Storms in the Workplace, available on Amazon in paperback and in Kindle version. I will leave you with one final thought.